Hello, students, teachers, and school leaders. Welcome to this webinar on AI and climate change with our guest speaker, Maria Vamvalis. My name is Heidi Siwak. I am the teacher coach for the Artificial Intelligence Challenge, and I am thrilled that you are joining us today for a really important topic. To get started, we're going to take some time for the land acknowledgement. Acknowledgements are something we hear regularly in our schools and at different events. And we want to make sure that the land acknowledgement isn't just a thing that we do, but that we honor the message. So let's take a moment to ground ourselves, maybe think of a special place, land that you feel particularly connected to. Put your feet on the floor, take a deep breath. Maybe close your eyes if you wish to, get comfortable. We acknowledge that we are being hosted on distinct and diverse traditional territories of the First Nations and Métis where we live. And I think we are on lands that are governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. The idea is that we can all peacefully live together as long as we each are mindful of only taking what we need. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. And I think we believe that the land acknowledgement is a moment for learning. So I will share something with you that I learned about a long time ago that I come back to again and again, which is a piece of artwork by Métis artist Christy Belcourt. And her artwork focuses on honoring the relationship with the natural world. Christy says, all species, the lands, the waters, are one beating organism that pulses like the heart. We are all part of a whole. The animals and plants, lands and waters are our relatives, each with as much right to exist as we have. When we see ourselves as separate from each other and think of other species, the waters and the planet itself, as objects that can be owned, dominated, or subjugated, we lose our connection with our humanity and we create imbalance on the earth. That is what we are witnessing all around us. So I think Christie's painting is such a beautiful idea for us to think about today as we think about the planet and climate change and the connection to artificial intelligence. So why should we learn about AI and climate change? When I was creating the challenge kit, I was really astonished at what I was finding out, both in terms of how much energy is required to create and use artificial intelligence. So there's an impact on climate change, but then also it's interesting that artificial intelligence is also being used to try and find solutions to climate change. I thought that's a really interesting tension. So we have invited, I guess, a speaker today, Maria Vamvalis, to help us explore those ideas and topics a little bit more. Maria is a doctoral candidate, a PhD candidate at OISE, University of Toronto, and she's researching how to transform education meaningfully so that we can respond to the climate crisis. She works with educators and school leaders right across Canada. She consults with organizations to think about, how can we decolonize citizenship? And most of all, how can we promote well-being as we challenge this reality of climate change that we are facing? So I think she is the perfect person to have with us today. So Maria, I would invite you to turn on your camera. I give you such a warm welcome. I have such high regard for Maria. So glad you're here, and I will turn this over to you.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Heidi. And I am so excited, everyone. Hello, my friends. I can't see you, but I can definitely feel your presence. And I'm so excited because for the next little while, I want to invite your incredible minds and your brave hearts to think about this complex challenge that Heidi laid out. Climate change is something we absolutely need to address. And in some ways, AI is contributing to the problem, but also has some potential to be part of the solution. So that's a wicked problem, which is something that you're exploring in the challenge kits. So I want to invite us into an inquiry question together. And you'll see that question right here on this slide, which is how can we ensure that we use artificial intelligence in ways that lead to well-being? for all living systems. And we're going to unpack what we're going to use as our criteria for well-being, because we don't want to use technology that is going to cause further harm. We want to be repairing harm. We want to be healing harm. We want to be innovating to make things better for everyone. And so that's the challenge I'm inviting us into to think about today when it comes to AI. So I know you were invited to have a piece of paper, and I want to give you just a few moments because you might have just a couple of ideas based on the learning that you've done so far about how AI can actually lead to well-being. So maybe there's things you've explored already that you think, hey, I think in some ways AI can contribute to making things better. So how do we ensure that? I'm going to give you just a few minutes to write down some of your thoughts on your piece of paper, giving you a little bit of think time. I'm going to invite you to come back to this question. And as we go through the next 45 minutes or so together, at any point, if you want to add to your thinking in relation to this question, I want to encourage you to do that. So I want to bring the land acknowledgement that Heidi shared at the beginning right through what I'm talking about. And it's interesting just to share, I think this is something really neat, but Heidi didn't know that I also selected this picture. We just found out as we were getting ready in the last 15 minutes. So I think that's a really cool synchronicity. And it seems to me that it's the universe's way of saying that this message is really, really important for us to highlight right now as we're in this time of a climate crisis and the rapid increase in AI technologies. So when you're thinking as an integrative thinker, I know one of the questions you might have already started to ask is about what things need to be true for something to happen. And so I want us to think about the criteria of what needs to be true if we want to harness the potential of artificial intelligence to contribute to well-being for all living systems. And to help our thinking about that, I've selected 3 criteria, and these 3 criteria come right out of my own research. I've spent really the last almost 8 years thinking about climate change and supporting well-being. So I want to put these 3 criteria, and as we're going through today, I want you to think about, as you hear about some of the impacts of AI and some of the uses of AI, I want you to think about applying this criteria to decide if it's a good use of AI or if it's something we should be really concerned about. So to support well-being, AI should increase justice. It should make things more fair, because when things are unfair, then that means people aren't well. AI should also support regeneration. And what I mean by that is it should help ecosystems to thrive. We know that our ecosystems are really struggling right now for many reasons. And so if we want to use AI to create well-being, it should support ecosystems to be well and healthy. And finally, we know that to be well, we need to have caring relationships with others. And not just other people, but also other species. Like, I can tell you one of my most important relationships is with my rescue dog, who I love, and also with the birds that come and sing outside every day. And so well-being also comes from having caring and loving relationships. So AI should actually help these things and not take away from them. So here's some of the challenges now I want to bring up, and some questions that we want to think about when it comes to AI and our environment. Can AI actually fulfill its potential? We're promised all kinds of things about AI. It can revolutionize this and that and help in this way and that way. And we get really excited about these ideas about how it can improve accessibility, how it can make jobs easier and more efficient, how it can support people in their thinking. But can it do these things without harming the environment? It's a really big question. We're going to explore some of the evidence about this question together. We know that AI is, as Heidi mentioned, it is being used to help deal with climate change. The problem is it definitely has its own emissions problem. And so for those not too familiar with climate change, basically climate change is being caused by the excess release of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is what's making the temperatures warmer and causing all kinds of extreme weather events. So you might remember the wildfires, if you were in Ontario 2 years ago. Climate change contributes to the hurricanes that we're seeing. Your family might be from parts of the world where you've experienced the impacts of climate change. So it is caused by the excess release of carbon dioxide, which is caused by burning fossil fuels. And we've been using fossil fuels because they actually are one of the most powerful ways that we can harness energy. The problem is it is causing these problems. And so we're in a point right now where we have to draw down carbon and make sure that we're not releasing that excess carbon into the atmosphere. Well, AI right now is contributing to releasing carbon in the atmosphere. And another problem is that as people are getting so excited about AI and all of its potential, unfortunately, its environmental costs in multiple areas, which we're going to explore, not just energy use, but water and electronic waste and land. The costs are soaring. And unfortunately, right now, because people are so excited and also people can make a lot of money through AI technology, it's certainly making billionaires much more wealthy. So there's a lot of excitement about that. And because of that, unfortunately, we're not getting all the information we need as the public about what is the true cost of AI when we're using it. So we're hearing all the good things, but we're not hearing about its impacts. And I'm here to tell you that currently AI has significant environmental impacts. So we're going to be talking about some pretty challenging and complex things. We are navigating a really challenging world. And what I want to invite you as we explore these things, because some of the things we learn about AI's impact on the environment are not always comfortable. They might challenge our own excitement about AI. So I want to invite us into some deeper thinking and share with you some of the ways that we can approach this really challenging problem that will help us become really good thinkers, decision makers, and leaders on these issues. So we want to be critically minded. We don't want to just accept at face value when people say, oh, AI is great and it's going to solve all our problems. We want to question that a little bit. We want to slow it down and say, hey, where's the evidence? Let me look at this issue carefully. Let me look at multiple perspectives about this issue. We want to be inquiry-minded. We want to explore some of these challenges in greater depth and understand the problem more deeply. We want to accept some discomfort when we're learning. Again, we might be learning about some things that are challenging that may make us feel things too. When we're learning about climate change, it's not always an easy topic. When we're learning about the environmental impacts, it's not an easy topic. So we want to acknowledge that, yes, sometimes we're going to feel uncomfortable, and that's part of navigating really complex problems. But we also have this capacity, all of us, to be holistically minded, to bring our minds and our hearts together, and to focus on wellness, to actually focus on wanting to create wellness for ourselves, for the people we love, for our community. And we can bring that kind of thinking to challenging problems. We also are imaginative. We've imagined the most incredible things as human beings. And I'm sure each of you has a pretty phenomenal imagination. We want to be visionary and think about, well, what is possible? What are the cool things are possible? If someone says, hey, I think we could create AI in ways where there are no carbon emissions. Well, we haven't solved that yet, but if we're being imaginative and visionary and we're working towards that, that is incredible that we could be working on that problem that would really open things up in terms of artificial intelligence contributing to well-being. We also want to think relationally and in systems, to think about, well, maybe AI benefits me in this situation, but it could be having really bad impacts on somebody else or another community. And I don't want to ignore those impacts. I want to think about those relationships. I want to think about the bigger picture of AI, not just in that moment, hey, it can help me with my homework. I want to really think about what are the impacts when I'm using it. And also, whenever we are engaged with really tough problems that stump us and might seem like, there is not a solution, we want to be courageous. You know, we think about all the ways that people have been courageous to create so many of the things that benefit us and our lives today. So I want to invite us to be these kinds of thinkers as we're thinking about these challenges with AI. And here I've got some artwork by incredible Black Canadian artist, Jackie Comrie. And this one's called Color, Health, and Hope. And so for me, this represents that imaginative, the visionary, the wellness focus, the healing, the repair, and the hopefulness that we want to bring to our approach to really tough problems. So let's get into it. Let's look at some of the tough things about AI. There was a study just done. And I'm going to share, I know I've got grade 6 classes and grade 12 classes, so I'm going to try to span the spectrum of giving some research that maybe some of the secondary students want to explore in more depth, and also sharing some big ideas for some of our grade 6 learners. So there was a study just done about how to actually quantify the carbon emissions of machine learning. And what you'll see here is this was a calculator that was created where you can put the hardware type, the number of hours that were used with that machine learning, the provider, and the region, and it will compute the carbon emissions that are created through AI learning. So now we actually have the technology and the ability to start to measure what is the energy use of AI. And as you can see in the bottom, I've included, this just came out in March 2024, this headline. AI is already using as much energy as a small country. And that's only the beginning. So now with the rush towards AI and AI being integrated everywhere and into everything, the number of data servers and stations is growing. And so this number in terms of emissions is starting to grow. So this is becoming a really complex problem. Unfortunately, some of the big tech companies like Alphabet, which you might know, it's the parent company of Google, they've already started to backtrack on some of their commitments to reducing their carbon emissions because they've really ramped up their use of AI. So this is not good climate news right now. We're not in a good place with how much energy is being used, and that needs to be considered. What's also true is that in France, they've actually developed a machine learning system that is focused, that uses less energy, but also experimenting with using just renewable energy, so solar and wind, for example. And that's a really promising direction. But currently, that's not where things are. We're still using a lot of fossil fuels to support AI infrastructure. I'm going to ask if you know. Maybe some of you know this already, but just in case you didn't, one single request that is made through ChatGPT consumes 10 times the electricity of a Google search. So I want you to just stop and think about that for a minute. And I don't know how you're using AI or how your families or people in your community are using AI, but the truth is that often a Google search it will suffice for the question you're asking. And so this is one area where we start to bring our criteria in of how we're using AI. So if we're just putting anything into an AI chat box, we need to recognize that we are increasing right now the carbon emissions in our atmosphere at a time when we should be bringing them down. So we want to think about and be thoughtful that if we're going to put a question into ChatGPT, we want to make sure it's a really good question that is going to benefit ourselves and our community in order to justify that use of carbon. So we want to be really thoughtful and discerning about how we are using ChatGPT. Why does it matter that ChatGPT consumes 10 times the energy? Well, as I said, we're increasing emissions, but right now we really need to be focused on decreasing emissions. Training a single AI model is equal to 300,000 kilograms of carbon emissions. So just to put that in perspective, what is 300,000 kilograms of carbon emissions? That's equivalent to 125 round trip there and back, 125 round trip flights between New York and Beijing, China. So I'm going to give you a moment just to process that information. That when we train a single AI model, that is how much carbon we are releasing. 125 round trip. That's the equivalent of 250 trips literally across the globe. That's a lot of carbon. I can actually feel all of us taking that in. It's like, whoa, that's a lot of carbon. And it's not something that we're thinking about or talking about enough when it comes to bringing AI into our lives. So this is something we really want to be thinking about. Another thing to think about, you know how people get excited about creating these AI generated images? Making one image with generative AI uses as much energy as charging a cell phone. So I want you to take that in for a moment. Because oftentimes we use things and we do something that's called we externalize the cost. Because we're not seeing up front, like there's no little, message that comes up when we're generating an AI image that says, are you sure you want to create this image? It will release this much carbon into the atmosphere. But maybe that's something we should be thinking about doing, because making an image using as much energy as charging your phone. Now think about all the people right now playing and experimenting with images. And some people say, yeah, some of those images are fun, but a lot of them, some of them are really not as amazing as, the images that we can create through photography and through our own human capabilities. And not only that, some of the images that are used with AI are actually causing harm, where people are getting confused about what's true and what's not true. So in this way, coming back to that criteria we talked about, are we using AI to bring forward more justice, to regenerate ecosystems, and to build healthier relationships? So there could be ways that we use and generate images that could meet that criteria. And so we might justify the use. But again, right now, when so much carbon is being released, we want to take a step back. We want to pause. We want to think about how and in what context we're using AI. And here's just one more way of kind of bringing this bringing this data to life. So when we look at a carbon footprint, when you travel from New York City to San Francisco, one passenger, you are releasing just over 100 pounds of carbon. The average human in their 1 year of their life will use and release about 11 pounds of carbon. Now, in American life, and Canadians are not so far behind, because in our society, which really highlights some global inequities, we use a lot more carbon than the majority of people on this planet. So already there's some real injustice and inequity about how we're using carbon, who's using the most carbon and releasing the most carbon. So that image is there to represent that the wealthiest nations and those of us who are most privileged in the global context, we're actually the biggest carbon emitters. So we have some responsibility in this context. A US car, both making the car and the fuel consumption in an average 1 year span, releases 126 pounds of carbon. And then I want you to look at what it takes to train that AI model. So that's another way of thinking about those 250 flights, 626 pounds of carbon. So that really gives you the picture of just how energy intensive the use of AI is. And it really should give all of us pause about how we are integrating this into our lives in the current context. Because I'm going to point out there's ways that, as I said, with renewable energy and other ways that we can perhaps have AI, but maybe it doesn't need to be as present in everything that we do. That's a question we're going to have to think about in our communities, in our society, in our schools, right? Because now that we have this information and this data, it should influence our decision making about AI. Another, did you know? Did you know that AI-related infrastructure, so those big data centers that are built to basically house the servers that keep all of this data going, will soon consume 6 times more water than Denmark, which is a country of 6 million people. So again, I'm going to give you a moment to process that. So what happens with these data centers is because they generate so much energy and heat, it's just like, you know, when you're maybe working on a computer and that computer gets really hot, you know, or you're charging your phone and the phone gets really hot because it's, you know, consuming that energy and burning that energy. Well, AI data centers are huge and they need to stay cool because they can very quickly overheat because they're processing and using so much energy. And so water needs to be brought in and literally cools the data centers. And so that water is a huge part of AI. And as you can see, 6 times more water than a country right now before we've integrated it is a lot of water. So again, why does this matter? Well, if we put our criteria of justice and fairness, we're using all of this water for AI when we don't yet have all the clear benefits. And over a quarter, 25% of the world's population already lacks access to water, including, as we know in Canada, many First Nations communities here lack access to clean water. So here's one of these complex challenges. We're developing a technology that needs so much water, and yet we still have not secured access to clean water for so many people, 25% of the world's population, and including in Canada, this is true. So again, thinking through that lens of our criteria, AI needs to do better on this. So there's a lot of conversation about making AI less thirsty. And how, so some are saying that AI can solve this problem itself. It hasn't done that yet, but there is talk that AI might be able to solve this problem. But again, there was an article recently published in a computer science journal about really looking at this issue of the secret water footprint of AI models. And this, I would say, it's really only been in the last year that some of this research that has existed, that people have raised concerns, but it's now really starting to come into public consciousness. And I think it's the right time because, again, as we rush towards using it, we need to step back and really think carefully about these really important issues. I'm going to give you another did you know. Oh, no, that went backwards. Sorry, 1 second. Another fact. A bottle of water, every time you do a chat GPT search, it is the equivalent of pouring out a bottle of water onto the ground. When you use AI to send one email, similar. So one like chat GPT or one AI prompt, of course, it depends on the prompt, but these simple prompts, that's how much water is being used. They've sort of calculated to basically keep those servers cool. So I'm going to give you a moment again. I've just shared a lot of things with you. You might be feeling a lot of things about this. Some of you may know about this already and be thinking about this already. And for some of you, this might be really new information. So I want to give you a moment again, just to come back to our overarching question and think about how might we harness AI to create well-being. Right now, what I've presented is not meeting the criteria that we've set out. So currently, we're not meeting the criteria because the use of water when people don't have access to water, that's a problem. There are some communities where, just to kind of highlight this issue, there's some communities where they've built AI data centers, but that community, because of climate change, is experiencing more drought. And so the community is saying, well, you need to prioritize that we get access to the water before the AI data centers get the water. And so this is where AI and climate change and human rights all intersect in something like that. The other thing I want to share with you is that in some countries, like right now, there aren't strong enough laws related to AI. But this is slowly changing. People are really asking for good policies. This is the right moment for us to develop really strong policies, environmental guardrails and human rights guardrails, they call them. So it's like, a support to kind of keep things in check as everyone's really excited about, all the potential of AI. But there are countries where there is no policy, and what's happening is they're building these AI data centers and they're not really giving any concern to the water use and don't have any environmental protections in place. So these are things we really want to be thinking about to make sure that our communities are protected and that everybody stays healthy. So coming back to this picture of nature again, it's that reminder, and the thread I want us to be thinking about is that AI literally is called artificial intelligence. It's built on actually the thinking that humans have done, but it's artificial. And so we want to be thinking in terms of the profound intelligence of the natural world and the deep wisdom that's been generated for centuries by human activity in relationship to the planet. We definitely have made decisions that are not wise, but we've also made some really wise decisions. So how do we keep this at the center when we are considering the use of AI? So coming back to our question, I'm going to show a short film. This comes from the CBC. And in this film, it's going to talk about some of the environmental impacts, but it's also going to start introducing us to ways that AI can be used to actually help our communities. And that's a really exciting thing. It's about how we're going to use AI. So as you're watching the film, again, I want you to be thinking about what's presented through the lens of this criteria. How just are some of the issues being presented. How fair? How much do these uses of AI support ecosystems? And in what ways do they strengthen relationships to be more caring with each other and with the natural world as well? We want to be thinking through those lenses because this is what helps secure well-being in our communities. So we're going to just watch this short. It's about 5 minutes. And again, I want you thinking through this criteria.
Moment. Used artificial intelligence like TikTok filters to turn yourself into an astronaut or ride a dragon. It's fun and harmless, right? Not quite. AI generates millions of images a day. And according to a recent study, just one image can consume as much energy as charging your phone. That's right. Just like most things, AI has a carbon footprint.
We definitely shouldn't kind of view AI as a costless thing. I think it's very easy to view it this as abstract thing on your computer that doesn't have any impact, but it does.
So where do those emissions come from? Well, around the world, most AI is hosted in data centers like this one. That sound you're hearing, those are fans being used to keep the hardware cool, as these computers are sucking up a lot of electricity and generating a lot of heat.
Running AI is running any other computer program. You have an input, you want an output, it's going to do lots and lots of operations. And doing lots of operations for one answer means that there's a lot of energy and electricity.
From Netflix recommendations to smart cars and image filters, AI is a big part of our everyday lives. According to the International Energy Agency, data centers and transmission networks account for 1% of global energy-related emissions. That's almost as much as the aviation industry. And AI is a quickly growing piece of that, but it's not all bad. It's also an important tool in the climate fight.
AI is being used in all sorts of ways to address climate action, from helping us better forecast solar and wind on the power grid to help us better integrate those into power grids, to helping better optimize heating and cooling systems in buildings to help kind of improve the efficiency of those systems.
In the global south, climate change is increasing locust outbreaks and threatening food security. An AI tool uses data on soil moisture, wind, humidity, satellite images, and more to predict locust swarms in some African countries. Farmers receive text alerts up to 3 months in advance of an outbreak. AI-powered models are also providing earlier warning systems for natural disasters like floods, and can help map flood patterns to guide disaster response. Here at home, you can see AI in action in some potato fields in PEI. Meet the AgriScout robot.
There were a few people who stopped on the road to see what was going on, what this robot is actually doing in the field.
It may look like a rover that belongs on Mars, but it's actually helping potato farmers, using cameras to look for potential disease in their crop.
It will generate a map with the location information. They can load that map on their cell phone. It will direct you where those infected plants are and get those out. We are planning to attach a robotic arm to it, that wherever it picks on the symptom, it gets those plants out.
And rising temperatures and drought conditions are making wildfire seasons more extreme. Bring in AI. German-based company Dryad is building AI-trained sensors for ultra-early wildfire detection. The company has deployed 20,000 worldwide.
These are solar-powered gas sensors. So behind this membrane here is a gas sensor that is sensitive to hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and volatile organic compounds. So it actually is like an electronic nose that can actually smell a fire. And we can detect fires as small as a campfire, even before there is an open flame sometimes, as long as the gas molecules are hitting the sensor. So we can protect about the size of a football field.
AI is becoming more widely adopted across society, and the types of models that we're using are also changing. Some of the models are getting larger and larger. This picture is changing, and we really have to be on the lookout for the growth in AI's emissions footprint. And fundamentally, one thing that is challenging in getting a hold of that is that there isn't enough transparency.
AI will continue to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions until we move away from fossil fuels.
Having an energy grid that is less carbon intensive means that for the same amount of computation, for the same model, you're going to have less of a carbon impact.
AI is here to stay. We will only use it more and more in our daily lives. But experts say we have to think about how we use it and its consequences.
We can't really afford to be distracted for 5 years thinking about whether the AI is going to be the terminator instead of addressing how it's going to impact climate emissions.
Thank you. Thanks, Margarita, for sharing that video. So again, in that video, sort of reiterating some of the points I've made, but also thinking about the ways that AI can actually be used, some really innovative and exciting ways that AI can be used to benefit our communities. I want to share, this is a pretty wild looking image that I've got before you. Now, for the high school students, I want to encourage you to look this up, this anatomy of an AI system, because actually if you go on it, it was a sort of installation and you can go up close and everything pops up and you get more and more information. It's extremely well researched. And what this is it actually shows all of the relationships and impacts that are involved in an AI system. So that involves the chemicals and the minerals that are used when producing AI. It includes the land that's used, the kind of internet infrastructure that's required, the human beings who are involved in building that system and in maintaining that system, all the smelters and refiners that actually have to be in place to create the infrastructure, the land that's used, everything that gets involved in training an AI system, the abandoned AI devices. There's a lot of e-waste that's actually also part of creating AI that needs to be addressed. So this is a really, really complex system. That's the point I wanted to bring home. I mean, we see it in some ways very separate from this. It shows up as ChatGPT or in other ways embedded in computer programs that we're using. But actually, this is a very earth-intensive technology. And it's really, really important that we keep that at the forefront, because it can be so easy to not think of it that way, to sort of think that it exists somewhere over here, that technology is neutral. It's not neutral. It is very earth intensive. It's very labor intensive. And so if this complexity that you're seeing before you, all these things that are involved in an AI system, those come from everything that's involved, I want us to think about, come from our commons as human beings. And what I mean by that is, the land that's used that belongs to a community that may, in fact, in certain instances, belong to indigenous communities. I want us to think about the water that's used, that's part of our community water. So if we're going to build something that takes so many resources, we do have a right as human beings to ensure, and a responsibility, both a right and a responsibility to ensure that it is being used to support well-being for our community. Because there's some really critical questions we should be asking about AI. We should be asking, who benefits from AI? Who benefits so much of this investment? Where does the wealth created from AI go? Well, right now it's going into the hands of just a few people for the most part. So that's something to be aware of. What cost is involved when we're creating AI? And who is bearing that cost? You know, that cost could be from people who are not paid well as they build AI. It could be from the land, the water, of course, our environment, our climate. So if we have such an extensive system that we see here before us, like all of this is going into creating AI, then we do want to ensure that it is being harnessed for good, that it's being harnessed to make our communities more fair, more peaceful, more ecologically regenerative. So that's the challenge that faces all of you and all of us, because AI is not just something out there, it's something that is going to continue to impact our lives and our communities. So this is a wicked problem that we want to be thinking and bringing our best thinking to this challenge of AI. So again, I hope that this question is something that can continue to guide you beyond this time that we've been together. That maybe you're someone who's already so excited about AI. And I hope that this question informs the way that you are excited about AI. That you think about bringing, as I said, your incredible minds and your brave hearts to ensure that AI is used in this way that leads to well-being for all living systems. I want to share with you, this is an image actually that was at the United Nations, where they created a large nature model of coral. Now we know that our coral reefs are actually under threat because of climate change, but there's some really promising ideas about how we can regenerate coral. What an incredible problem to commit your life to is how do we regenerate our ecosystems? How do we heal them? How do we repair our ecosystems? Like, what an incredible set of problems to dedicate your life to. And I want to draw your attention to Lean Gorison. She's an innovation biologist, and she has spent her life committed to this problem. And in the context of AI, she wants to remind us all about natural intelligence. So instead of AI, she talks about NI. Mushrooms make rain. People may not know that, but look it up. Whales cool the climate. You may not know that either, but they do. Foxes actually contribute to greening the tundra. Plankton in the oceans create clouds. And these examples show that there's an intelligence behind the success of our natural world. So everything that we've been gifted is actually from this incredible natural intelligence. It's life that has prevailed over millions of years of natural selection, and it creates the conditions that enable us to even be here. We're part of that natural intelligence. We're not robots. We're part of all of these processes. And the wisdom is that we should be leaving things better than we found it. That's the way life actually works. Natural intelligence leaves things better than it found it. And that's the wisdom behind 3.8 billion years of natural processes on this planet. That to me has a lot more weight than even AI. And we should be taking this really seriously as part of our decision making. And guess what, everyone? ChatGPT actually agrees. When it was asked about what intelligence can actually help sustain life on Earth, ChatGPT said, nature knows best. So if we want to say that artificial intelligence has these incredible capabilities for thinking, it itself has said that nature knows best. So we should really think about this when we're considering AI. And I want to also share with you a way that young people your age are actually showing the real visionary leadership about how AI is used. So I want you to think about that criteria again. And as we watch this video, think about how this young person is harnessing AI to create more fairness, more ecological regeneration, and healthier relationships.
A way to express my joy of coding with my passion for climate science. I'm Julia, and this is AI by me. I'm studying computer science at the McGill University in Montreal, and I'm specializing on machine learning for climate science. It started actually in high school. I never really understood how memory is working. How do we even store stuff in our brains? How does this work? I love this intersection between how do things work in computer science and how do they work within ourselves. And I have the feeling that a lot of things that we discover in the area of AI also tells us something about ourselves. There is an image in the minds of people how a computer scientist has to look like. And I often get the feeling that I don't look like this. High school was difficult. I was in a class where we actually learned to develop apps. It was something that was very male-dominated. They don't expect me to finish my project. They were taking bets. It conveys the message to you that you don't belong here. Coding is an exciting work for me and I just enjoy it. It excites me to learn a lot of new stuff. AI isn't used so much in climate science, so I have the feeling that this is the method to go in order to get this information fast and make it accessible to as many people as possible. I was always a winter kid and I loved playing in the snow. I learned skiing when I was 3 years old. The project that I have been working on is for snow classification. Mosaic is the largest Arctic expedition that we ever had, and they were collecting thousands of snow profiles. And usually you would manually label them. You need to be an expert, it takes a lot of time. Having an ML algorithm that is actually able to provide you the classified information immediately is a huge leap in order to get to this knowledge much faster. And in these urgent times, that's actually pretty helpful. We don't know if the Arctic will be there in 10 years. I hope, of course, that we can still do something to preserve that. Sorry, there's one thing I really would like to have in the film, and this is I can use AI in order to make knowledge behind climate data accessible, but AI won't solve climate change. Humanity can solve climate change.
So this comes back to the who are we seeing showing the most visionary leadership in AI use? Well, it's your generation that is going to be sharing that and showing that kind of leadership. And so as you're engaged in this challenge, again, we're coming back to this criteria to guide you as you go through and you think about the use of AI in your lives and in your community, that you want to ensure that it is being used to support well-being. And you want to be courageous about that it should be creating communities that are more just, and it should be supporting regeneration and strengthening our relationships with each other and with all species. So coming back to this question we started with, I hope you have more ideas about how we can ensure that the use of AI leads to well-being for all living systems. So you may now be thinking about how important it is to ensure that AI focuses on renewable energy. Unfortunately, a number of companies are actually looking at nuclear, which has a lot of problematic and controversial elements to it. So that's a really critical issue. You might be thinking about how it can be harnessed like Julia to really support innovations in the context of the climate crisis. And so I want to leave you with this about coming back to the thinking habits that can support you as integrative thinkers that are navigating these challenges, of how you can be critically minded and inquiry-minded, accepting the discomfort when learning hard things, to think about wellness and bring your head and heart together, to be imaginative and visionary, to think relationally and systemically, and to be courageous. And when you bring these talents that you have and these capabilities, we have not yet seen the world that you are capable of creating. And so I want to thank you for your leadership in shaping the regenerative futures and bringing all that you are going to bring to these complex challenges. Thank you so much for inviting me to share with you today.
Oh my goodness, Maria. Students and teachers out there, what a remarkable lesson Maria just brought it through with a question to start with and setting the criteria and giving us so much to think about, things that I didn't know. But Maria, you've helped shape some of my shifts in my thinking now, things I'm curious about. And when I think of our beautiful students out there, problem solvers, learning problem solving methodology, I can imagine them going forth now into a world of AI and thinking about, oh, there's a problem in climate change that I want to work on now. So I think you have inspired so many of our students, and I can't thank you enough today for bringing such a unique and interesting topic to our students and shaping it in such a way that we could really understand and get at the deep thinking underlying how you've approached learning, the pedagogy here. It was so wonderful. And with that, it is 2:15. So our session is coming to an end. But students, if you have questions for Maria, I'm sure you must have many questions. Your teachers can send them to us in the WhatsApp chat. You can email them to me and I can forward them to Maria. There's ways for you to ask your questions, and maybe Maria can point you towards it, in a direction. But we're going to end our session here, and I thank you so much today for this wonderful, wonderful learning that you brought to us.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye, everyone.
Stream has ended, even though it still says custom live streaming service. We have ended the